Absolutely. I am Luis Barriga, lead game designer in World of Warcraft Legion. Yes, we are. This is as stoked as I ever remember being about any expansion. Right, so starting with Warlords of Draenor, we took a different philosophy to features. Prior to that, when we added a feature in the game, we just carried it forever, right? But with Warlords of Draenor, we said, well, what if we didn't do that? And that gave us a lot of freedom. So we said, we're going to make garrisons, and they're Warlords of Draenor only, and whatever pieces of the technology or of the feature that we like, we can keep and incorporate into the main game, but by and large, we can just say, hey, if you want to play garrisons, you can do Warlords. And what we like about that approach is it lets us really try new things that are pretty experimental without being married to the idea. So with artifacts, similarly, we're saying there are currently no plans to take them forward after Legion. But if there are pieces about them that we like, if there are certain traits, for example, that we want to say, hey, we really like the way that Mage plays with, 2 of these 3 gold medal talents, then we can incorporate them into the base class potentially. Or you could see parts of that making the return by way of class sets or legendary items, etc. So one of the things that allowed us to do is we were able to make artifacts really powerful because we weren't afraid of saying, well, if we introduce this, we have to keep it forever. Worst case scenario, if there's a class maybe has too complicated of a rotation as a result of artifacts, well, after 7.0, we don't have to prune that because it automatically lives in Legion and we don't have to carry it over. So we really like that freedom because it basically lets us pick and choose the best parts of the feature. Well, the main thing we want to do with artifacts is not necessarily a lore thing, but it's almost like a badge of honor thing, where if you unlock the different cosmetic looks for your artifacts, many of them require you to do really prestige things or Easter egg things. You're going to be able to transmog other weapons to that look. So that'll be a cool thing, like in 9.0 or 10.0, 10 expansions from now, right? Like someone shows up with the lightning Ashbringer and you're like, oh my god, how did you get that? So we think that's a suitable sort of nod to like that mighty weapon. That's a really good question. I would be a little sad if we didn't get see players being able to use that. So I'll definitely talk to our guys about that. So a couple of things, right? Is we have the artifact knowledge system, and it basically mathematically makes it so that after you've done what we expect you to do in a week, it gets you get diminishing returns in terms of what you can do. So you can still grind, but you'll get a much better return next week. So we think it's a good balance for a more casual player and a hardcore player. It does incentivize you to try to play every week, but if you do fall behind, we also accelerate the catch-up. So it's similar. It's the thing about the artifact thing, though, is, the artifact power acquisition gains is basically we expect at some point in the expansion players will have all the talents, and then after that you're just getting the base modifier scaling. Yeah, so I think what players will find is if you grind a lot, you will have a small difference in power, but by and large, if you're the type of player that plays every week but maybe not as much, you won't be too far behind. That's a really interesting question. I mean, it was something that we've done flavors of that with like the I forgot what we call it, the Azeroth choppers voting system, where we felt like it wasn't super fun to be part of the losing side or the winning side even, because it felt like oftentimes as a player sometimes it feels a little bit out of your control. So absolutely. So one of the things that if you play the Broken Shore scenario, I mean, I don't want to spoil it for players that haven't done it. It's still active on the servers, but the player's side, the Alliance and the Horde, they take a beating, you know. Some big name characters, you know, you have to play to find out what happens to them, but it's not pretty, right? So what we find is that doing that at the end of an expansion is a little tricky because it leaves you feeling like without a sense of accomplishment. But doing it at the beginning or in the middle, it's much more doable. But there's definitely many chapters as you play through the Broken Isles where your side doesn't have a very clear, decisive win, and later on you get resolution. That's super interesting. I mean, it's the sort of thing that we've done for flavor stuff, you know, but it's harder to do it for content because some people's schedule, they don't get to play at night and they want to see that content, or vice versa. But it's definitely a cool idea, and it's something that, you know, as well as other things, we think about it and we try to find the right application for that. We had a town somewhere a long time ago that at night all the villagers, yeah, they turned to war again. Yeah. Yep.
And that was our idea, because when during the day when you were there, there was simply you.
Yep, and then they switch out, yeah. So it's super cool flavor. It would be harder to do with like a rare boss that drops good loot and stuff like that, yeah. So that's interesting. So we have some flavor items that, you know, are nods to Hearthstone, but in the end, you know, it's a separate game with a separate audience. We have a lot of fans that they love Hearthstone and they've tried WoW, and maybe it's not their thing right now, but we want to not necessarily mishmash them together too much. So it's cool when we do references back and forth, or, you know, we unlock a character if you do something in WoW. That stuff feels super cool, but we want to make sure that if you want to play Hearthstone, you don't have to go through a game, you know, like World of Warcraft and load the character and log in. It's a pretty different experience for sure. So it's tricky. I can't answer that question with super high precision, but let me say there's a reason for that. We have a good reason for that. So we totally understand that initial reaction, right? But one of the things that was interesting, and when we started talking about the world quests, right? They were inspired by Diablo bounties, certainly. They were in a way our way of saying, what is WoW's adventure mode? So sometimes fans think, oh, you just copy and paste code or whatever. But that's not how it works at all. We look at a feature in a game, and by the way, a lot of us worked on Reaper of Souls and now work on WoW, and vice versa. People in Blizzard move around teams a lot, and we have friends in other teams, and we talk about design challenges, we talk about features. So we borrow from each other's designs all the time, and it's funny sometimes, you know, the fans from one game will say, oh, ideas from this other game are coming through, or fans from the other game are saying the same thing. But in the end, it's not a copy and pasting of code as much as it is, what is our version of that? And then when I play World Quest now, it feels totally different than the experience from bounties in Diablo. When I play bounties in Diablo, sometimes I would even, you know, do I like this set of bounties? Do I want to reroll? Do I want to do this different act? And in WoW, it's more time-based and more cyclical, which gives it a very different feel. And we tell you, hey, here are your rewards that you're going to get, which gives me another layer of, which ones am I going to prioritize? Am I going to do the ones that count for my emissary quest, or am I going to do the one with the upgrade? Or am I going to do the one that's not an upgrade, but I really need a good item in this slot, and maybe I'll trigger a plus, you know? And it's a sort of thing that we feel that in actuality, once fans experience it, it feels very, very different. Same with wardrobe, same with any of those ideas, right? And it's funny, all the way back to like original WoW talents, you know, they looked very much like Diablo 2's talents at the time. And it's the sort of thing that's like, it's hard when games are so iconic, Blizzard games especially, right? Like that some of those designs don't just become part of the game design DNA of our company. So we borrow wherever it makes sense, and I think in the end, as long as when our fans are playing the game, it feels like World of Warcraft. which I think you will agree it does, then yeah, so in the end, it won't matter as much where those ideas come from. It's interesting. One last thing, I feel like I'm rambling, but when we were designing the Demon Hunter class, right? I don't know if players will feel this or not, but a lot of the movement abilities, we looked at games like Overwatch, and we looked at games like Heroes of the Storm, their version of Illidan, and we wanted to capture some of that feel. So it's like, it's not the sort of thing where players, because they don't see a one-to-one feature, they don't say, oh, this got taken from this game, but we play all of our games and say, hey, what's our version of this? So I think in the end, fans benefit from that. Well, sometimes we do references, you know. Sometimes we do like little tributes to other games, and so I'm not gonna say no, but it's not not closing the door to that either, because who knows what we're gonna do in the future, right? Yeah, it's cool. Like, or we have games that embrace it, like, you know, Heroes is where everything comes together, you know. So it's cool that our games can be serious, but sometimes there's a little self-referential humor in there, or a nod to another Blizzard game as tribute. So. Right. So as you kind of hinted at, getting a complete balance, you know, like, oh, we have 3 of this type, 3 of this type, and etc. That wasn't the priority for Legion. For Legion, the priority was like, what is the class fantasy? And part of it came from, we wanted to give them each spec a unique artifact. So the artifact kind of needs to amplify the fantasy. And in some cases, the fantasy wasn't quite there. We weren't happy with it, so we needed to go review it. In the case of Hunters, you're right, it added yet one more melee spec. But in the end, we thought there was something to that idea in classic WoW where, you know, survival hunter, it wasn't quite viable, but there was this promise of a melee hunter, right? And so in the end, that's more important to us than having complete balance of all the classes and across all the spec. So it's definitely not something we're going to close the door on and say, no, never. But one of the things that I hope players appreciate is it feels like a really cohesive experience. Like, you're a disciple of Illidan, right? And if you played, you know, Burning Crusade back in the day, like, you saw the Night Elves teaching the Blood Elves, and you're like, oh, he was making an army. He had plans, and it all fits so nicely. And the other thing it lets us do, when we focus on one race like that, if you create a Demon Hunter right now, you have so many options with horns and tattoos and skins. And it's something that if we added another race, we would have to be very, very deliberate, you know? And it doesn't make sense to go very broad. There's a couple of races that maybe could potentially make sense, so we don't necessarily want to say never, we'll never add anything. But as of right now, there's no plans to add them. No, so that's interesting. I do think, though, like, players who might not like the aesthetics of elves, for example, if you look at how much you can push the demonic side of it, you end up looking not quite like a traditional elf, right? So I think part of the Demon Hunter experience is, as you get more powerful and learn more demonic things in the lore, they start exhibiting demonic attributes. So you can actually push your character to look really, really demonic. So that's something that, like, I mean, I've always loved elves, and I think it almost feels like another race in a way, right? Like, they have their own voice. We brought in different voice acting. They have their own slash joke slash flirt, all those cute emotes, right? Like, so in a way, like, I'd say even if you weren't a fan of elves, give them a try. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. We've always been thinking about them. I think it's the sort of thing that we have to find the right expansion to do them, right? For example, Demon Hunters, we wanted to do them for a very long time, but so, like, after Wrath of the Lich King came out and we saw how well Death Knights work when the whole expansion supports it. You have Arthas, you have Icecrown, you have Acheris, and then you have Death Knights. It just brings everything together. With Legion, we have the return of the Burning Legion. We have Illidan as a very important character in the story. It felt like Demon Hunters were just that piece of the puzzle that made everything make sense. So with sub-races, if we just threw them in any random expansion, it might or might not feel right. But in the right expansion, it would absolutely just bring that sort of missing flavor, right? So I would say, as always, we keep talking about things, but it's not the sort of thing that we can do lightly.
Okay, still, but it's not off the table.
Not off the table, no. So I would say, and to add to that, we have the artifacts talent, or artifact talents that add another layer to that, and then you have legendaries that add another layer to it. So in a way, I would say that not only is it hard, but absolute balance is impossible. That's why you always see patches, you always see like little tweaks here and there. The thing that I think is important is, as long as like we keep putting out content, our players are going to find that, you know, okay, they're doing things to address balance issues. You know, just recently we did some upgrades to the Vengeance tank from some performance issues that we were seeing in the beta, right? So I think more than anything, yes, it's very difficult, and we have a lot of really smart designers working on it. And you know, if you play a class that's like, oh my God, when is Blizzard gonna fix this XYZ issue? We always look at it, and it is very difficult, but we try, and as long as like we keep putting content out, we will get a chance to address those issues. We love time walking, and what's interesting is that technology has opened the door to lots of other things. On the time walking raid comment, we really like. I personally loved playing that throwback Molten Core we did a little while ago to celebrate the anniversary. Like, it was really fun playing that with people that hadn't done Molten Core before, and just watching them wipe on trash packs, you know, because boss fights have gotten way harder since Molten Core with lots of different mechanics. But it was fun to see that, you know, the patterns of patrols and stuff, and the respawns of patrol, that it still had some teeth. You know, it was still wiping people that they consider themselves really hardcore raiders. Like, I can do this and go in, and it's like, oh, guess what? That core hound pull just wiped us. It was so fun. And then, you know, they picked up and learned it. It was just awesome. So no promises on it, but just saying that we really liked it. So we'll see what we do in the future. Oh, hey, there was a mission for the dancing suit. No, that's a fun question. I'll give you another question. Do you have another question?
Let me think about it.
Because the dance studio, honestly, I can't promise. It's top secret. Sure. So the easy one for me is Demon Hunter, because it makes it, for a player like me, that some of the other classes throughout the years we've added more and more mechanics, understandably, because players want to, you know, see their classes go to new directions and stuff, get new spells, new abilities, new interactions between those abilities. Some of the classes have gotten really complex, and that's why we've had to do some amount of pruning before. So it's really nice having a class that gets a clean slate at a high level, so that we make it really approachable, but with still a lot of depth. So it's like easy to understand and learn at first, but hard to master. It has a lot of like intricacies to it. So Demon Hunter is always the easy one for me to say. So instead, I'll say sort of it's not a hidden feature, because players will see it, but it's world scaling. I think there are hidden benefits to world scaling. What I love about that feature is that I have this because I play with my kids a lot, and as soon as we get out of sync, I'm higher level than them, and we can't play together in previous expansions. In Legion, if let's say I start doing Azuna with them, and they kind of fall behind a little bit, and I go do a different zone with a friend, I go do Valshara with a friend, and they're 102 and I'm 108, I can come back and we'll get, you know, rewards that scale with the level, and all the enemies will be the right level for me to be the right level for them. It was something that we were a little bit experimental with, and it paid off. I think players are gonna love it. One of the things that it let us do is all the zones are viable for end game content, so we can have world quests throughout the whole game, or throughout the whole expansion. Whereas before, we would have had to make the choice: which zone do we want to be the end game zone? Well, so like I said, it's very experimental. So one of the things, it could have been something that we like, hey, go all out, put it everywhere. But one of the concerns we had is that there might be gameplay patterns that we don't see at first, and then we regret it. So one of the things we wanted to do is see how it shakes out in Legion, and then make sure that we apply it wherever it makes sense to apply it. Which areas do we group together? Do we take an entire expansion like Burning Crusade and say it's this level, or do we put 2 expansions side by side? What do we do with 1 through 60, etc.? So more than anything, we want to see how it plays out, see how players use it, and then make sure that we make the smartest choices going forward. Right, so that would be something that, as on the game dev side of things, we wouldn't necessarily make that call. That would be a call for a different part of the company to make. What I can tell you is that for just that little bit of, a few minutes that you see at the beginning of the game as an opener, that style of cinematic, it takes a lot of effort. So I think if it were to be made into a full-length movie, you'd have to figure, there'd be some challenges or some very smart people to figure out, but definitely not something that on the game side of things we would make that call or consider. Awesome! I'm so excited.
And thank you for the talk. It was awesome.
Thank you.
I hope those were